All right, all right. Welcome, everyone. This is the panel on Bitcoin privacy, specifically Bitcoin privacy tools and techniques. My name is Adam van Wirdum. I'm a journalist. I work for Bitcoin Magazine. I'm also the author of the Genesis book, which tells the story of the prehistory of Bitcoin. And I'm joined by three privacy experts, Bitcoin privacy experts. To the right of me, we have Shinobi. Shinobi, introduce yourself.
I'm Mr. Maxi. Look at me. I'm the technical and opinion editor at Bitcoin Magazine, and I'm a little silly.
All right, then we have Seth for privacy.
It's a little hard to take you seriously in that, but this will be interesting. I'm Seth for privacy. I'm the head of strategy and marketing at Foundation, and just extremely passionate about personal privacy. The most important form of privacy is almost always financial privacy because it underlies the rest of our human rights. So excited to talk about this.
All right, and then to the far left, we have Dan Gould.
Hi, I'm Dan. I am the lead developer of the PayJoin dev kit, and that's batching a little bit differently than CoinJoin during payments.
Yeah, just explain what it is for the people that don't know.
Yeah, so when you think of a CoinJoin, most of the time, if you've heard of it, it's a separate mixing step people use to take their coins and get new coins without revealing the history those coins had in the past. With PayJoin, at the time of a payment, you and your counterparty both contribute to the transaction so that a third party can't see the history the same way they would using if you just sent to a single person. Yeah.
All right, so we just had a panel on the Samurai developers' arrests, the Free Samurai panel. So obviously we're not going to get into depth here on that topic, but I do want to start off with it. So we've got three privacy researchers, developers, experts. What are your thoughts on these developments? How does this impact Bitcoin in general even? Shinobi, yeah, you can start.
Well, I mean, I think the basis of the charges are just beyond absurd. Like, they ultimately boil down to being a money service business or a money transmitter and being a party to laundering money. And just at a technological level, at no point does Samurai have any control, any ability to direct funds of the user anywhere that they don't want. They are simply a messaging server that is facilitating users coordinating amongst themselves to not even, like, technically speaking, transmit money anywhere. In a CoinJoin, all of your funds are simply being moved from one of your own addresses to another of your own addresses. They are spending to yourself. So just the basis of these charges is ridiculous. It's effectively, in my mind, boiling down to telling you where you can put your own money, or in a more strictly technical level, like what form a piece of digital text that you sign with a key can take. And it's just absolutely absurd.
So let's say they are found guilty. Seth, what would that mean for Bitcoin development, for Bitcoin, for privacy tools?
Yeah, I think for a long time we got very comfortable with the concept of Bitcoin's base layer being transparent and applications providing privacy in Bitcoin. So we got used to there being a central entity that provided a service that was non-custodial. Like he said, it was really just a communication platform that helped you to build a transaction with other people that moved your money from one pocket to another. No transfer of funds, nothing like that. And that system works beautifully until you enter an adversarial environment. And that's clearly what we're in right now in the US and throughout much of Europe especially. And that really brought home the concept of we can't rely on services provided by application developers as the form of privacy that we have in Bitcoin. We have to shift to a focus to make the privacy tooling of Bitcoin as decentralized, as censorship resistant, as resistant in adversarial environments as Bitcoin itself is. Because while we talk about Bitcoin itself being unstoppable, the thing that's unstoppable is me sending a transaction to someone else. No one can stop that. It is censorship resistant. But what's not unstoppable is the central entities building tooling around Bitcoin, especially when there's money involved. So I think this it's an absolutely terrible situation, and it's not something we should be in. But there is one little silver lining, which is that it helps us to shift focus to understanding that privacy tools built on Bitcoin have to be decentralized and unstoppable. We can't just think that we're going to be okay building things that are easily taken down by a government.
Yeah, so Dan, for you, it's maybe also a bit of a personal question. Like, how does it affect your work or you personally? Like, are you worried about, the consequences or what's going on here for yourself?
I think we can learn a lot by, for example, some of the leaks that happened after of people's public keys all being clustered if they were relying on Samurai's Electrum server. We know that maybe you trust your wallet provider, but they have adversaries that can get that information if it ever gets collected. So one, preventing that kind of information from being collected is really important. And then beyond that, what Seth says about decentralizing things and making them, the way I think about it is systematic upgrades to the way we do Bitcoin privacy rather than application upgrades, because only so many people are going to use your app. So we need to improve the way we do privacy so that any app or service can have this guarantee of a certain level of privacy. With regard to my concerns, I think a lot. Unfortunately, the rules, the guidance that was out there that everyone was relying on doesn't seem to be followed by the Department of Justice. So it's very confusing, and it makes people less interested in running coordinating software or what would otherwise be thought of as network software. But I think that someone still has to do it. We have to proceed.
Right. So already in the wake of the Samurai arrest, we've seen some pretty big developments, bad developments for Bitcoin privacy, at least. Specifically, the Wasabi wallet shut down its coordinator. So but new coordinators popped up, right? So what is going on there? What is actually the status there? And is Wasabi wallet still usable? Seth, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can jump in. You probably have some to add as well, Shinobi. But so I have a long history with Wasabi Wallet, and I've always had some concerns. They shut down their coordinator. They're still shipping software, but they made it much easier for anyone to spin up their own coordinator, which has advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is obviously it's much easier to spawn many coordinators to force governments or regulators to play whack-a-mole. Obviously, there's still immense personal risk for anyone running a coordinator because it's clear that the U.S. Department of Justice and much of Europe views that as something that's illegal and should be prosecuted. Obviously, I think that's false, but that's the view that they're taking. But the other risk and issue is that you're having to trust a third party to not be Sybil attacking you, to not be using their own funds to try and break the privacy that you think you're gaining in those mixes. There's already been issues where coordinators were pretending that you were having a mix, even though they were actually just making you mix only with yourself and essentially stealing your money through the fees that they were charging. There's a lot that happens when you open up anything. It becomes the Wild West, which we're all used to when you've been in the Bitcoin space. There's pieces of it that become the Wild West. And so it's been very hit or miss, and it's something that's hard to recommend as a tool to use right now because there are so many issues with fragmented liquidity, with having to trust a third party, with a lot of pieces of how the actual CoinJoin rounds work. CoinJoin really works best in the centralized, trusted third-party instance, which is painful because that's not a sustainable model. It's just not a sustainable model in adversarial environments. So we'll see what happens with that. I don't know if Shinobi or Dan have more to add on the Wasabi front.
Yeah, I mean, I think really the thing to consider here is the implementation of Wabi-Sabi itself. And that was never really completed or done up to the standard that the actual designer of the system, nothing much, kind of spec'd out before the implementation work began. And there are just a lot of weird edge cases, such as how the client goes about registering coins for a coin join and how that handles the timing of that. Just other issues in general during the actual input registration process that actually do have kind of edge cases that can be taken advantage of by the coordinator to de-anonymize or associate individual inputs from a single user together from the coordinator's point of view. And those were never really addressed after Wabi-Sabi or Wasabi 2.0 went live. And so I feel like those weren't really fatal issues when it was ZK Snacks running the coordinator. Like, I personally, like, from a technical point of view, think those are disastrous shortcomings, but that was an honest team that I don't believe would ever take advantage of things like that to harm their users. But given the current state of things with just random coordinators all over the place, ran by who knows like who, I think it's incredibly dangerous for Wasabi users to make use of coordinators not run by known, reputable people that they would trust not to take advantage of implementation shortcomings like that.
There's also something to be said about writing software that can't be evil. And the issue with these services that are companies is they don't have a huge incentive to do that because there's a profit incentive where they want to cut corners in order to make money. They do have their reputations, of course, but when you're coordinating some coin join to make a profit, you want to get that product out as soon as possible, and that doesn't always, those incentives don't always line up with the business and the developers. And I think it's unfortunate that we see that breakdown with Wasabi 2, especially with all these coordinators out there now, but now they can actually take people's money in some cases, as far as I understand, because the software, you're trusting the coordinator to not be evil, but if the coordinator itself is adversarial, that software is just not bulletproof the way it was put together.
Yeah, then you've recently made the case, have been making the case that a viable way forward for Bitcoin privacy is to maybe sell it as a savings tool, or at least combine it with a cost savings mechanism. Do you want to explain that point?
So Bitcoin privacy and scalability are two sides of the same coin. When you're scaling Bitcoin, you want to post less data to the chain. And when you're trying to have some privacy, you want to be posting less data to the chain. So the easiest way to scale any sort of database is with batching, and the exchanges figured that out long ago. And in 2017, when the fees went up, everyone had an incentive to go and implement that. And we're going to have fee run-ups again, I'm sure, where they're going to need to improve their technology to be competitive and reduce the fees they charge their customers. So because they're two sides of the same coin, it seems possible to me, based on examples and some research, that we can batch, for example, consolidations with payments to have ambiguity inside the transaction that doesn't necessarily depend on equal amounts like a coin join does, but still has multiple interpretations. And then not only, a big problem with the equal amount coin joins is that you always get, you take this step, this coin join step, you get change, and you have to spend money and get more change. So you're constantly battling this degrading privacy over time where people reveal more information after the fact. If you could do it at the time of payment and there was an incentive to do it where you saved money just through batching, input side batching instead of just output side batching, then we should be able to solve both problems at the same time. And PayJoin is the first step for that, where you have both the sender and the receiver contribute inputs and outputs rather than just batching today where an exchange contributes outputs. And then in the future, I'm sure we can coordinate multiple people together to do batches at the same time and split their output amounts so that there are multiple ambiguous interpretations, not only of the transaction in isolation, but also across the transaction graph so that you have privacy that can actually be sustained over time and is not this isolated coin join incident.
Seth?
Yeah, just to step back a little bit, the hard part when you're talking about Bitcoin privacy is that there is no silver bullet. Like, CoinJoin helped with a very specific thing, which was forward-looking privacy. I want to disconnect the history of my payments from what I do with my payments in the future. That is a vital piece of privacy, but that's not everything. Things like PayJoin are fantastic, especially at the time of payment, because they let you make payments in a way that's more privacy preserving than normal, because your transaction can either look like a consolidation, it can look like a single party 2 in, 2 out spend. It can take a lot of forms while actually being something that's between two people and actually hides a lot of things like amount and specific inputs and outputs. but that's really more of a payment side thing. It doesn't hide the history of the inputs of that transaction. It just hides who is the actual spending entity in a specific transaction. And then you have things like silent payments, which are fantastic for helping receiver privacy, but they don't fix forward-looking privacy. They don't fix spend time privacy. You need a lot of different solutions together. And that's always been the hardest part of Bitcoin privacy is there's not one application, there's not one Bitcoin improvement proposal that fixes all of the aspects that come into play when it comes to actually making a transaction private. There's a lot that goes into it. So we can't look to one specific thing to solve it, but rather have to look to how can we build Bitcoin in a way that better allows users to opt into very strong privacy.
Shinobi, do you want to add anything, or shall we move to the next?
Well, I think if I remember right, this will lead into the next one. But Dan's entirely spot on in saying that scalability and privacy are the exact same thing. I mean, just something as simple as Lightning, which was strictly designed around scaling the transaction speed and the number of transactions a user can make, kind of just came along with, and how that worked, a great deal of privacy improvements as far as how users transact. And it's by no means perfect, but it is a huge improvement from just naively sending and receiving coins on chain.
All right, I think you need to hold the mic a little bit closer to your...
This?
Whatever that is. Well, okay, so you mentioned Lightning. Shinobi, let's just pivot the topic to Lightning in general. So what is the status of privacy on Lightning? Are there weaknesses? I mean, I'm sure there are weaknesses there as well. So what are the trade-offs, and are there developments in this domain? Shinobi, you can kick it off.
Well, first of all, Lightning has amazing privacy from the sender's point of view. Me paying you, you learn nothing about where those coins came from, any Lightning channels I have, any UTXOs that I use to open those channels. But the receiver still has to leak information to the sender, at least as it's currently implemented, essentially revealing the channel that they have, their node ID, which would identify them as a specific agent on the Lightning network. And so it's very kind of slanted in favor towards the sender in terms of the types of privacy that it offers. Now, there are kind of multiple proposals, like some implemented, some being worked on, that could drastically improve receiver privacy on the network. But that's kind of the main shortcoming and the main thing that has to be addressed to kind of even out the degree of privacy as far as the sender versus the receiver on both sides of the transaction.
Seth, any thoughts on Lightning privacy?
Yeah, I mean, he hit the nail on the head. Sending privacy is almost always fantastic. There are caveats to that, just like there are with anything. Like if you're running your own node, sender privacy is fantastic. If you're using something that's custodial, obviously you don't have privacy from the custodian. If you're using something like Phoenix, they actually handle the routing for you, so they know where you're sending payments. So there's a broad spectrum to expect. But if you're, in the simplest sense, running your own node with your own channel, you do have strong sender privacy. On the receive side, there's been good developments lately. Bolt 12, which is finally starting to take off, while on its own is not a privacy improvement, it is starting to become paired with things like blinded routes. So essentially what this lets you do is that when you share a Bolt 12 offer, which is just a static string or a QR code, instead of having to generate a unique invoice every time someone wants to pay you, you can give this out, you can post it on your website, you can put it in your Twitter bio, whatever. And whenever someone goes to pay you, they scan this offer, their node reaches out using these blinded routes. It's able to get an invoice from your node without actually knowing which node that is. And it also uses Tor-like privacy to actually make these queries over the Lightning Network. And so that actually helps greatly on the receiver privacy side. The other main thing that needs to change is the use of alias SCIDs, which we don't need to get into the weeds here. But essentially it's a way to, again, give someone the information they need to send you a payment without telling them, this is my node, this is my channel, this is the on-chain transaction that backs it, which is the current state of Lightning. And I think not a lot of people understand that when receiving funds in Lightning today, the way that you have approached on-chain privacy for the channel open is wildly important. If you're just sending, there are very little issues. But if you're receiving funds at all, the way that you fund the channel opening actually has a drastic impact on your privacy when you're receiving funds. That is improving already with Bolt 12 starting to finally gain adoption. Hopefully LND will have Bolt 12 support soon. Pairing that with blinded routes, with potentially trampoline routing, with alias SCIDs. I know it's a ton of jargon, but essentially just think these things are going to improve receiver privacy, and we need to see them widely adopted yesterday.
I agree that sender privacy is probably better than on Bitcoin, but I'm not sure I feel as strongly that it's like a sure thing we know about quite yet. It seems like if a passive adversary has some view into channel balances and sufficient nodes, they can tell how payments are moving across the network. Maybe they can even figure out which sender sent to which receiver. And in practice, the way probably most people in this room are using Lightning, if they are, is with a light client and a hub node where that node knows their exact channel balance and can see it change over time. So I do want to see more analysis of how robust the privacy is, especially how much it would cost to attack. And I think it's also important to consider that when you go in and out of Lightning, you're leaving an on-chain footprint. So until we address that lower level concern, it's hard to make any guarantees about the ultimate privacy you get at an upper level, because you're not only operating in that upper level. And I think this even touches on some of the network privacy that's even below Bitcoin. How are we communicating with our counterparties? How are we sending messages to them? Is Tor sufficient? Can all of these payment services or even non-custodial wallets sync balances privately without clustering things to an IP address? These are the things I'm thinking about.
All right, as a last topic, and all three of you will have about a minute to respond to this one. One of the solutions that's been gaining some traction as well is eCash, like which was the original digital cash system invented in the 80s, and now it's sort of coming back to Bitcoin with Fedimint and Cashew are the two, right? Is this the future of Bitcoin privacy? Is this a good solution? What are your thoughts on eCash? Let's start with Dan and then make our way to Shinobi.
I think for the light clients, or if you're using something on your phone, your wallet for day-to-day, or maybe most people in the future when Bitcoin is a settlement network and not strictly a payment network, if we're moving huge volumes, then eCash is really going to help end users. There's the same problems still apply for them, where they peg in and out of a mint, but I'm hopeful, and I believe in the people that are working on these things to greatly improve Bitcoin privacy. Their heads are in the right place, and they're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, it's hard in a minute to cover my thoughts on this. There will be a debate tomorrow.
I'll give you two.
Yeah, oh, there we go. I got two. Twice as much time.
Just doubled it for you.
There will be a panel tomorrow where we'll be debating the merits of eCash for Bitcoin. So I definitely recommend that. If you've heard all the rumblings about eCash, we'll get into a lot more nuance. But the short answer is I don't think sacrificing custody is ever worth it. And especially when it comes to building solutions that are extremely...
You don't use a bank?
I mean, that's not Bitcoin. Yeah, I do, but that's fiat. I don't want fiat on Bitcoin. I want Bitcoin I can actually hold that can be self-sovereign. So when it comes to eCash, I understand the desire to have something that's easy to use, that's privacy preserving. But the sacrifice of custody not only breaks down the not your keys, not your coins concept that I thought we all held dear, but at the same time, it also makes all of our funds, maybe it's just a daily spending wallet, but when you're talking every single Bitcoiner using eCash potentially, these things become extremely vulnerable to government takedown, to seizure, to theft, to adversarial environments. It's a centralized custodian. So when you think eCash, think better custodians. Don't think layer 2. Don't think solving privacy on Bitcoin, because what it's really doing is improving privacy when you're using a custodian. And I think custodians are just trusted third parties we need to route around.
Final word for Shinobi.
I think I kind of agree with you.
Hold your mic close to the fucking thing.
Okay. I kind of agree with you, Seth, but I think I take a more balanced approach to looking at the issue. Like, in my opinion, there will always be a class of Bitcoin users that use custodians, whether it's out of pure convenience, whether it's out of their incapability of actually dealing with the complexity of custodying their own coins, whether it's just due to sheer economics, like they are not able to afford to bear the costs of whatever using a blockchain and interacting with it through things like Lightning are going to be in the long term. And I think for that class of users, eCash is an amazing improvement in privacy. Like a traditional custodian is just a database right next to their name, and they have zero privacy. They have complete insight into every transaction that that person makes using that custodian. And it's just a reality. There will always be people that use custodial things. And I think it's incredibly important not to get kind of wrapped up in this purity of self-custody or else, like nothing else is acceptable, that people like you or me might prefer to use this network, this protocol, like in that way, and just ignore this whole class of users that will always exist. Like no matter how much we improve like self-custodial use or bring down costs, there will always be some people who won't use it that way. And I think it is critical to not leave those people behind and just go, well, privacy is not for you then.
All right. Well, that wraps up the panel. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Give a hand to the panelists. And enjoy the rest of the conference.